Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. And I hope you enjoy this new show, whether you're viewing it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the episode. I do want to thank you for being part of my audience. You can also find links to videos or podcasts on MiamiGhostChronicles.com, as well as where you can submit your story about any eerie experiences you've had, which I would love to hear about. Just go to the Submit Your Story tab. Please subscribe to our channel so that you receive notification of when we release a new show. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is where I usually live stream and where I give you a behind-the-scenes look at locations where new episodes are being filmed at. I also tell you about all the interesting guests that will be appearing soon on Stories of the Supernatural. I hope you enjoy the show, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How you all doing today? I'm doing really, really good, and we're going to discuss one of the most interesting things that I know a lot of you love to hear about. It's about UFOs, and more importantly, I have a gentleman who's written several books about it. His name is Mack Maloney. Now, he is the best-selling author of numerous fiction series, including Wingman, ChopperOps, Starhawk, and Pirate Hunters, as well as UFOs in Wartime, What They Didn't Want You to Know. He's a native Bostonian. He received his Bachelor of Science degree in journalism at Suffolk University and a Master of Arts degree in film at Emerson College. To say that Mack has got lots and lots and lots of books, he does. But one of the two that I want to talk to him especially are one of the ones that he wrote, Beyond Area 51, The Mysteries of the Planet's Most Forbidden Top Secret Destinations, and also UFOs in Wartime, What They Didn't Want You to Know. So for all my conspiracy theorists, you're going to be happy about this. So how are you doing today, Mack?
I'm doing good, Marlene. Thanks very much for having me on.
On the contrary, my pleasure, totally. And I'm going to ask you, Mack, what I ask all my guests, in this case, because we're looking at the UFO aspect. How did you become interested in UFOs? Have you ever had an experience, or how did that happen for you?
I've never had an experience, but when I was growing up in Boston as a kid, I just became fascinated with UFOs, and because at the time in the 50s, I'm dating myself, but there were a lot of UFO reports in the newspaper. A lot of the science fiction movies back then kind of were UFO related, right. And I'm kind of from a military family. I have not been in the military myself, but a lot of my relatives, my father and brothers, were in the military, and there were always lots of military books hanging around the house, and especially airplanes. And I don't know, for some reason, that science fiction aspect and the aspect of reading a lot about aircraft as a little kid. It just came to this junction of UFOs. So I was always on the lookout for them. I read every book that I could get my hands on. And then when I went on to start writing fiction books after college and such, I had lunch with my editor once, and I just happened to blurt out saying, the thing about UFOs is people seem to see them more during wartime than peacetime. And it had occurred to me, years before, and it just was an idea rolling around in my head. So he said, "Hey, that'll make a good book. Would you want to do that, even though it's a nonfiction book?" So I said, "Yeah, sure." Not realizing it's about 10 times more work than a fiction book. You have to do the research,
yes,
vet stuff and everything. But I did it, and that's what really got me into this aspect of how does the military deal with UFOs? How have they really dealt with them? Let's say, and. Right. I just find that fascinating. So, that's how UFOs in wartime came about.
So let me ask you, when you were doing the research, what happened? You came across a lot of information that you were like, wow, or?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Exactly. And I know that people, have heard this before, but, UFOs came into our kind of consciousness in the late 40s with Kenneth Arnold's sighting. But, UFOs have been around forever. They have been around as long as recorded history. And when I started digging into, stories about Alexander the Great seeing them, and people in in the Middle Ages and in the Dark Ages, if you just look at some of the documents from the Dark Ages, it's not a great leap to realize that these people were seeing, the lights in the sky were UFOs, what we would call UFOs.
Right.
And then, all through World War One, fascinating in between the wars, lots of very interesting and unusual UFOs sighted. And then during World War Two, the Foo Fighters, people have written entire books about the Foo Fighters in World War Two. And when it just kept accumulating this knowledge until my office was just like filled with, stuff, and so then we put together, I think it's 170 different little stories about instances where our military or someone's military has come in contact with UFOs in the 20th century.
Right, because if you think about it, like you said, ancient civilizations or pre-airplane, in other words, they couldn't mistake it for an aircraft, in other words.
Yes, right.
And at that time, people were pretty familiar because they used it for seasons. They were pretty familiar with stars and comets.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
for them, like you said, to make an observation of something that they couldn't identify, then it begs the question, what was it that they were seeing?
Right. And as you said, with the advent of airplanes, at the early part of the 20th century, now all of a sudden you have people looking up, the simple act of looking up and looking at something flying over. And also people up there flying around, seeing stuff that they know aren't airplanes. You almost have like more witnesses to see UFOs, once we, got off the ground. So, and what that has developed into, and we talk about this a lot too in the book, is that, these days, airline pilots and military pilots are our best witnesses of UFOs because, especially military pilots, they've seen it all. They've seen. They know what Venus looks like in the daytime. They know what, the reflection of oil, burning oil looks like reflecting off the water. They know what another airplane looks like. They know, and they look unusual, but they know. And then when they see something that they don't know what it is, that's a UFO, and that is someone who is up there all the time. And if they don't know what it is, then it has to be something kind of strange.
Well, I belong to MUFON, and I also belong to a local group here in Miami that gets together. MUFON will come in and do a presentation, but, then everybody, hangs out and talks. And there's a lot of, like you said, trained observers, whether they're police officers or ex-military. Mm-hmm. And some of them will tell you, I saw this, but I was told, or I was smart enough to know, like, shut up, don't talk about this, unless you're always going to be known as that guy that saw whatever.
Yes. Well, that's the problem both in the military and in airlines, the airline industry, is that, let's take the airline industry first. I know a guy who flies for American Airlines. He flies from Chicago to Beijing twice a month over the pole, okay, and back the same way. And he says, we see stuff all the time. He says, but, just the politics of his job is if you go in and you report it, next time you're up for a promotion or whatever, and you're up against someone who hasn't reported something, that guy gets the job. You don't.
Yes, that's exactly.
And in the military, same thing. The military pilots will talk about it among themselves, but they never bring it to higher authority because they know, once again, when it's promotion time, whatever, that's going to hold you back if you're, competing with someone who hasn't made UFO report. So our two groups of the best UFO, witnesses are kind of, they've been clamped down, let's say. They can't talk about it with the risk of their careers.
Yeah, most of them will only come about and talk about it once they've retired.
Right.
And it's like, okay. And because also it's more and more people are talking about it. Mm-hmm. As in, but still, it has that stigma. If you have some type of responsible position, like you said, they're not going to come out and tell you, because what you said, but they'll make the other choice.
Right.
And this is the thing that you think about it. Okay, let's say, some people were mistaken, even if they're trained observers, or they're lying. But there's been so many sightings that everybody's lying and hallucinating.
Right. They all can't be hoaxes, and everyone can't be lying. I mean, it's as simple as that. And all it takes is just one UFO sighting to be true. You know what I mean? Exactly. All it takes is one, and then they might as well all be true. Obviously, something is out there. People see things that they can't explain, as we were talking a little bit off air. They don't
Hmm.
necessarily have to be the green men from Mars,
Yes.
but there's something that we don't understand. And the question that I have, both, writing about it and, as I mentioned before, we have a radio show, we talk about it, is
Hmm.
that a lot of people think the U.S. military know what UFOs are. I don't believe they do. I don't think they know anything more than we do.
Yes.
They have more
Yes.
evidence of it. They definitely have more evidence that they exist, but I think they're just as much in the dark as we are.
Hmm.
And that's kind of fascinating in a way because they get accused of knowing, what this is, but if they knew, it's the greatest discovery in, the history of humankind. And they would be holding this back from us. Why? So I just think I know that they have more evidence of them than we do, but I don't believe the U.S. military, any military, knows what UFOs are for sure.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Mac, and I'm going to explain why. Because everybody, of course, thinks that the secrecy that, whether it's because we've traded information with the ETs, hybrid.
Right.
Sometimes I think, like exactly like what you said, that sometimes maybe the reason why they have held back on actually admitting it is because then they would have to admit of how much they don't know,
Hmm.
and that makes talk about people wigging out because
Right.
maybe they're thinking, well, if the government knows about it, they'll handle it. And if they ever
Right.
came out and they would say, well, who are they or what are they? We don't know.
We
Where
don't
do they
know.
come from? We don't know. Everybody would be like, what do you mean you don't know? And sometimes I think that it's like you said, it's not what they know, it's what they don't know as to
Right.
why they haven't come out. And we talked about that in December. They kind of made an admissions that there was a program that was
Hmm.
being funded for research into UFOs, as in we don't know what their origins are, and that was
Right.
everybody was like, huh? They
Yeah.
actually
Really.
admitted to that?
See, that's the thing too, is that because Project Blue Book, supposedly was closed at the end of the '60s, and at least that's when they stopped funding it. And
Hmm.
all that time, up until last December, the U.S. military and the U.S. government would say, we no longer look into UFOs. We don't have any kind of a program looking into UFOs. And then it turns out that they were lying, that they did have this program, that they were
Right.
funding it. And so it's kind of like, well, and once again, when that happened, I thought, and I know a lot of people out there thought, why now? Why is this trickling out? Why? I can tell you a really quick story that's
Sure.
connected to this. Okay, on our radio show, I'm lucky because a lot of the people I just happened to grow up with in Boston turned out to work for the government agencies. And I know a lot of people say that they know people work for the CIA and FBI and so on, but we really do, and they're on the show.
Okay.
And and they'll talk to us. They're under assumed names and so on. And this one guy who works with the FBI was sent to Washington last summer to take part in this kind of workshop and they do them 3 or 4 times a year where they'll have someone from the State Department, someone from the military, someone from the FBI, someone from the CIA, someone from here, there, everywhere. They get together in a room, they give them a problem, and they say, how would you solve this problem? And usually the problem is something like, what if terrorists took over a cruise ship? What if terrorists took over JFK Airport? And
Right.
then they kind of talk about solutions, let's say, okay? And he's been to a number of these things. Last year's question was, what would your response be if the United States recovered a flying saucer, a UFO, right? And when they announced the question, everyone just looked at each other and they said, "You got to be kidding me," because this is like so
Yeah.
not how these things go.
Hmm.
And he says that was really surprising, and he thought to himself, the first thing he thought was, "Wow, are they getting us ready for something?" Because that's
Right.
what these things are for, to kind of get you ready for the
Hmm.
unexpected. So yeah, so he told that story on our show, and we were like, "Oh boy, yikes!"
Of course.
And then the video comes out in December. So
Right. And this is the thing, like you said, he's been used to all these examples of catastrophes or what
hmm
if, like things that could happen, in other
yeah, like
words.
a nuclear plant blowing up or
Right.
being taken over by terrorists, or those kind of almost like movie scenario things.
Hmm.
But
Exactly.
they had never used anything, haven't they would never mention UFOs or anything, and now all of a sudden, boom, here they are doing this.
Yeah. It's almost like, okay. And I imagine, um, makes you think, like you said, Is there something that they're anticipating is going to happen shortly, and they're saying, "Hey, we cannot keep up this. We don't know what it is,
Right.
or because if not, it's going to be worse. So we have to start." Even though a lot of people say, "Well, Hollywood has conditioned people." I mean, I know that originally, like you said, back in the 50s and 60s, it was the Cold War, and a lot of those UFO
Hmm.
movies came out, and then we had the Close Encounters movie, and then it's progressed since there. So a lot of people will say, well, you're acclimated. We are, but
Right.
we're not, because it's
Right.
always been in the realm of never proven.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing. And once again, we're talking about stuff that we talk about on show all the time. And it's like, I blame the media for the state of affairs right now because, like you said, look at how many movies,
Hmm.
big blockbuster movies, have to do with like ETs and stuff. You start with
Yes.
Close Encounters, you start with War of the Worlds, these really
Hmm.
good movies. Independence Day. I mean,
Yes.
and it's about ET, and it's about us making contact with some other life form. Okay, but when these things happen, like especially when the video came out in December
Hmm.
of that incredible thing that you can hear these pilots talking about it and everything, and
Right.
then as soon as it went back to I was watching ABC this morning, and they showed the video, and right away the people behind the desk started making fun of it. Oh, that's the
Of
Millennium
course.
Falcon. That's from Star Wars. And it's like, wow, you don't think people would be interested in an intelligent discussion about this? They go see all the movies. They want to know these
Of
things.
course.
But the media
Because,
just brings in that ridicule factor, and it kind of wrecks it all.
well, and I want to ask you also, because like you said, that there's a spike sometimes in sightings when there's war, and I've
Hmm.
also heard that there's more sightings around certain military installations.
Hmm.
Did you find that in your research? Is that accurate?
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, the second book that I did was Beyond Area 51, because when you sign a book contract, they always have second refusal on your next book, So
Okay.
I had to come up with like kind of a different kind of idea, So
Right.
we just said let's talk about all these Area 51 type bases around the world, every secret base like that except Area 51. Okay, and we found them everywhere. I mean, I think there's 15 or 16 examples in the book, and they're in England, they're in France, they're in Russia, they're up in Alaska, they're in China, they're in Australia, and all these like really, really kind of scary secret places that the U.S. military and other militaries are doing this stuff in,
Hmm.
and every single one of them has some kind of UFO history attached to it. Every single one of them.
Right.
And so it's like it's the chicken and the egg. What came first? You know
First.
what I mean? Why do these secret bases have UFO histories? And some of them are just really, really way out. But so who knows? And that also leads to the thing where I get this idea that the UFO, the people, whoever are controlling UFOs, I get this feeling they're looking in on us. They're
Right.
observing us. Maybe they're time travelers, time tourists, coming back and seeing how history is made or whatever. But some of the stories about like the British Area 51 and
Hmm.
Russia's Area 51, they're just fascinating.
Well, and this is the thing, that because if you look at it, like Stephen Hawking, who recently passed away, he kind of, like, I don't know if you remember, he kind of said, humans are so hot in pursuit of that proof of
Hmm.
ETs coming here to Earth, but we have to be careful because we might be on the short end of the stick, because obviously, as
Yes.
far as technology is concerned, we're inferior, and usually that formula, the inferior, get picked on.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, are they observing us? Are they monitoring us? Have they been interjecting there or giving us some type of technology, maybe whether it was in the past or now? Maybe there's more than one of them. And
Well, there's a good chance of that too. Sure, it's like the Native Americans, looking, out on the ocean in the 1500s or whatever, and say, "Hey, what's that out there?" Is that? It looks like a big ship. I wonder what that's about. I mean, maybe that's what's happening to us. Just slowly but surely, we start seeing evidence of these things. And as Stephen Hawking said, you might not want to invite them in. You know what I mean?
right.
Because look what happened to the Native Americans. So that could very easily happen to us.
And
Oh, sorry.
it's okay, Mac. Do you think that's an accurate concern, as far
I do.
as that we don't know if we're going to be treated what's fairly nicely.
Well, just the way things seem to go here on Earth, if we can take what's happened here on Earth as an example, I think Stephen Hawking's warning, I think, has some credence to it, because any civilization, any kind of intelligence who has the ability to come here
Exactly.
must be of a higher technology. And that goes back to, what I was saying before, is that I don't think the U.S. military knows as much as we think they know.
Right.
Because this whole idea that, we have, up until just a few years ago, they were launching the space shuttle from Cape Canaveral. That's like, trying to launch a dump truck into orbit. And some people believe we have anti-grav machines out in Nevada. It doesn't make sense to me. I think that anything that comes here, will have a much higher technological level than us, and they could take us over. It's as simple as that. It could happen.
Right. And I'm going to reference Star Trek. Why not? Where the prime directive was don't interfere. And a lot of people, I think, mistake being technologically advanced with they're nice or fair. And that doesn't always...
Right.
Because we're basing it on human beings as far as our morals or whatever. And we're talking a different species who may not understand or care.
But if all these things that we've been seeing over the years, and I mean over thousands of years really, if they were all part of the same thing, if they're all part of this other intelligence that we don't know about, we don't know about them. They know a lot about us.
Oh yeah,
because they've been in our skies for all these years. And another kind of odd thing too is that people think UFOs try to hide from us. That they tried to be stealthy and everything, but they don't, because people see them all the time.
Yes.
People see them all the time. I mean, they act in a peculiar way, no doubt about it. But, look at the Hudson Valley sightings, where like literally hundreds of thousands of people saw, these huge triangles going down the Hudson River for days, weeks at a time. I mean, that's not hiding.
No, of course. And then, of course, the explanations that, because of course, the first thing everybody thinks is that a military. No, that's not military. And no explanation is really given as far as what the origin is, and it just, of course, time goes by and nothing. And I know for people that have actually had that firsthand experience of it, it's mind-boggling, because it's like your reality shifts. It goes on its side, because it becomes from the possibility to it does exist.
Right. The closest I ever came to a UFO sighting, and believe me, I was like really excited. We live in Massachusetts, and we actually live on an island, a barrier island, and there's a lot of like sand dunes and so on and so forth. And we were out at dusk one night looking at the waves, and we looked out towards the south, and over the marshes I could see two separate groups of lights. Green, amber, red, white, blinking off and on. I'm going, wow, look at this. And it's like they were low to the ground, and they were probably a mile and a half away, and they're coming right towards us. And I just remember thinking, I'm actually going to see a UFO, because this is what like everyone describes them as, And they went over our head, and they were two medevac helicopters heading for a hospital in the city where we live. And it was like, up until that second where I realized what they were, I would have bet $1,000 that I'm finally having my UFO sighting.
It was like
I was so excited. So like you say, like if you people, and I've talked to people who actually have one, they're not helicopters. These things are like really crazy, and it changes your life in a way. I think you're special in a way if you have a UFO sighting, and I think some people will see them. A lot of times they appear to people who don't believe in them. But if you're out looking for them, you're never going to see one, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And also what we just, because before we go into what we were discussing before is how do they travel, do you think that the fact that we're actually looking to Mars, do you think that might have something to do with why maybe they've sped things up as far as disclosure about ETs?
Well, it could be. I mean, again, we've had people on our show. We've talked to people where they say that there are secret bases on the moon, secret bases on Mars, all kind of like ancient structures on Mars and everything. But the thing is that like for the moon, for instance, there's been a Japanese satellite that has been orbiting the moon now for several years. It's in a very low Earth orbit. You can go on their website and see
Mm-hmm.
the live transmission of the moon. It's covered every square inch of the moon, okay? And
Okay.
anyone can look in on it. There are no secret bases there because, this satellite would have seen them.
Exactly.
Same thing with Mars. Mars, now we have so many things orbiting Mars, taking pictures. If there was some kind of real sign of civilization there,
Mm-hmm.
we would have seen it. I would love for the face on Mars to be true,
Oh,
but
sure.
but we would have seen it, and you can't expect, the U.S. has satellites orbiting the moon and Mars. Russia has satellites. China has satellites.
Mm-hmm.
You can't imagine all these people who are basically day to day enemies, or antagonists, to all of a sudden come together in a conspiracy and say, okay, we have all these
Yes.
issues, but we're not going to talk about that fortress on Mars.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
just wouldn't happen. So, but on the other hand, if it looks like we're going to Mars soon, hopefully, sooner than later. Maybe whoever is looking in on us say, okay, now they're really kind of,
That's what I was going with.
yeah,
Because I was
yeah,
thinking, going to the moon is like, well, that's a satellite, it's
yeah,
off
right, yeah,
off the
sure,
Earth. They're kind of like in their same neighborhood.
right, right.
And personally, what they said that they thought that they had seen what was or could be water or frozen water. To me, I
Hmm.
was like, oh, I think we're going to be the first Martians.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
like maybe that's what they were waiting for all along. Like, okay, now they're going off planet,
Right.
and we need
And
to. I don't want to say
see,
interfere, but
well, maybe there's some reason then that they have to make their presence known, that we've actually, have the ability to go to another planet. I mean, a man, humans actually going to another planet, which if, Elon Musk, if his dream comes true, this is going to be something that's going to be happening, pretty soon. It's not
hmm
going to be happening in 2050. It's going to be happening in late 2020s or even sooner.
right.
NASA came out the other day, said that as far as their long-range explorers and telescopes, space telescopes, they expect to find some kind of alien life by 2025.
Wow.
This would be that there's a satellite going up called the James Webb Space Telescope that is actually be able to key in on these planets where we've discovered other planets going around stars and see if there's carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide in the atmosphere, and that would indicate that there's some kind of industry or whatever.
hmm
So this is something that's going to be coming from a scientific point of view. Pretty soon.
Right.
It's not the UFO landing on the White House lawn, but it's kind of scientific proof.
Oh, absolutely. And we were talking also that another aspect, because we always think of extraterrestrials as in UFOs or whatever.
Hmm.
We think of it as well, how we measure distance, let's say interplanetary or, in light years, etc.
Right.
But what if they're coming in intradimensionally?
Right.
Because they have the technology or because of the forms that they have, which allows them to do that. I
Right.
know some people will be like, what?
But see, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
It makes more sense that they might be somehow traveling in time. They're able
hmm
to move in time because we are here on this planet in this kind of lonely little solar system out in a very lonely part at the very edge of the Milky Way galaxy. Okay, we're not special in the least.
Oh,
You
no.
know, um, so and like I say, we put trillions of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to put the space shuttle up in orbit. That's like the most complicated piece of machinery ever in history. Okay, for someone to go from here to there, I mean the
hmm
distances, even just to get to Alpha Centauri, the closest other star,
Oh,
you'd have
yeah.
to like travel like thousands of years to get there.
Right.
So traveling the way we travel is not the way people are traveling in space. We just
No,
don't know how. I,
exactly. And I do think that there are what they call either rips or portals sometimes
mhm.
between dimensions that account sometimes for.
Right, yeah. I mean, Einstein said that it's you can bend space. I mean,
hmm
it's gravity is proof that you can bend space, and
Exactly.
and wormholes and so on. And then I read the other day that that now they think that a human being could actually survive going through a black hole. They always thought you'd be
Right.
theoretical pop, but now it said, well, it might not be that bad. And what's on
hmm
the other side of those things? So. Um, I'm glad that we live when we live right now, because we know more now about all of this stuff than anyone ever did, obviously. But we're also progressing to it faster and faster and faster. So sometime in the next decade, everything might just change.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for all we know, like I'm going to go back to Star Trek. The beam me up, Scotty, where you basically your molecules are shot
But
across and you
yeah,
reassemble at the
yeah.
other point B. And it's like,
Hmm.
why not? Just because we don't know how to do it, but that would be an easy way of going light years and
Right.
distance wise.
There's a thing I was reading about the other day. It's called it's an Einstein theory called spooky action at a distance. Okay, which
Okay.
is a very cool title.
Mm-hmm.
And what they found out was that if you take a and believe me, I'm no egghead at all. Okay, I'm a product of the Boston school system. Okay, so I really but they say if you take an atom, a hydrogen atom, and you split it in two. Okay,
Okay.
and you're able to keep one on Earth, and you're able to put one out light years out into space. If you were able to kind of take a little hammer and hit the one half of it here on Earth, it would start to vibrate, and the one out in space would start to vibrate as well. No matter how far away they are separated, they will act the same. Okay, spooky action is the difference, which is such a great title for something, a book, a movie, something. But Einstein
Yes.
proved that. Okay, so what does that tell you? That tells you that
Yeah.
what you have here on Earth can happen light years away if the atoms line up.
That is so interesting. That is so interesting. And what do you think about the idea that at some point they might have seeded us? Of course,
Right.
thousands and thousands of years ago, and basically what they including all those ancient sightings are they're kind of checking on the experiment.
How things are going.
How things are going, right?
Yeah, well, they're not going too good. Maybe that's why they're not here. But yeah, I mean, I read all of von Däniken's books when I was
Hmm.
in Eric von Däniken when I was in college, and I just couldn't get enough of them,
Right.
because there just seemed to be so much proof that something happened here. It looks like, about 10,000 years ago, something that we really can't explain, and you just see these remnants of it. And,
Hmm.
you know, is there a chance that there are other people here, other intelligences here before, we kind of became quote unquote civilized? I think so. There are
Right.
places in South America, there are places in Turkey, these fortresses that are built on the top of mountains that are almost the
Yes.
size of, as high as Mount Everest, and basically we're talking about cavemen. How do
Right.
cavemen, raise blocks of granite that are like 600 tons? You couldn't do it
Hmm.
today. These places exist. And some of the things that happened to the Sumerians, the first people who had writing and so on, they
Exactly.
believed in people coming down from outer space and helping them. So, seeding us, I don't know. Visiting us, I'm thinking, if they're out there, there's a good chance they did visit us.
Well, and then you think exactly like what you described. It's like, okay, we're going to erect this in the most difficult location that you could, especially when we're not talking any type of machinery, to do this work. Like you said, we're going to do it in the most difficult locations to erect a structure,
Hmm.
and they would do it. And some of these ancient civilizations, where manpower was needed, usually for survival, as in whether it was crops or hunting, and then they would
Right.
still use these, like you said, in the Nazca lines or all these places that that the manpower would have had to be incredible to produce these things, taking
Hmm.
years. So in other words, they were pulling manpower from usually other activities that would be needed
Right.
to make sure that they had food and survival.
Right.
So otherwise, it
Exactly.
was very important for them to do this.
Right. See, that's the thing is that, well, okay, you need a certain amount of manpower, as you say, to grow the crops to feed, your civilization, whatever. You're the Incas, the Aztecs,
Hmm.
whoever, the Egyptians or whatever. So you are taking, manpower, man hours. I mean, there's a place in Turkey called, I think, Gobi Tebeki or something. I
Hmm.
probably have that wrong. But it's this massive fortress up on a mountain that is just like you need oxygen to go up there practically. What
Right.
were cavemen doing building this stuff up there? Why, once again, if they did it, why was it so important to them? Or if someone else did it, why?
Exactly.
especially down in South America. There's some of them down in South America that just like they're so far out. Like I say, you couldn't build them today, yet these people
Right.
did it. So, um,
Oh yeah, if you
I
gave him the tools that supposedly these civilizations had and said, "Go build this,"
yes,
he would
right,
be like,
right.
"Yeah,
How could we do it these days? How could you get a
exactly."
600-ton piece of granite shaved perfectly to fit into
Mm-hmm.
something on a plateau in Peru that's like, 7,000 feet above sea level? How do you do
Yes,
that?
exactly.
But they did it.
And even when you look at some of these locations that, and I'm going to use, even though they're not civilizations that really didn't have any type of connection as far as we know, but they were
Hmm.
building very similar structures, as in either
Right.
pointed or pyramid or, aimed at the heavens. And then you look at Stonehenge, that
Hmm.
they're discovering all these other that these pieces of stone weighed tons,
Right.
and there was no technology as far as we know for
Right.
that time period. That how would they have done this, or why?
Why? The question is why? Why would you
Why?
do that?
Yes.
But it must have been their a priority because it had to come over, creating the food, the hunting, and so on and so forth. This was a priority for these people, but
Hmm.
and not just in Stonehenge, but all around the world about 10,000
Right.
years ago. Why were they doing it? What was the why was it so important to everybody?
Right.
And there's no, I don't know, is it connected to UFOs? Is it, who knows? But yeah, I find it fascinating. I find it fascinating that, science these days, I mean, archaeologists, and people who study archaeology in Egypt, they don't want to hear about any of that stuff. But there's proof that like at one point, water started wearing away the Sphinx. Water started wearing it, they don't
Exactly.
have any, I mean, the water was in, Egypt 15,000 years ago. So is the Sphinx that old? I mean,
Exactly.
once this kind of stuff, is able to go into the scientific realm without any kind of a ridicule factor, that's when I think we start to get answers.
And you said it right there without the ridicule. And I mean, believe me, I believe that science needs to be there. I just have a problem with some of the scientists that don't leave the door open for other possibilities just because it hasn't been proven yet,
Right, right.
which
Well, once
is
again, it's politics. It's almost like we were saying with military pilots and airline pilots is that you're not going to advance far
yes.
if you want a grant for
Oh
$1 million
yeah.
for
Of course
UFOs in
not.
Egypt. But at some point, and it's not going to. And the sad thing is, it's not going to happen in our country. This is, what I feel. It,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to happen in the U.S. The person who figures out, why they built these fortresses, on top of these mountains in South America, the person who figures out, what UFOs are or whatever, they're going to be in China. They're going to be in
Yeah.
India. They're going to be in these places who don't have this kind of idea that, oh, we can't talk about that, we can't study this.
Right.
Kind of like let it all hang out and see where. And that's too bad because I think time has kind of passed us by as far as that kind of stuff. I think that it's the people who discover what UFOs finally are. I think it's going to be someone in Asia, and not here.
Right. And I tend to think sometimes that there might be more than one. As far as I don't think that because everybody's thinking, okay, well, it's one, but what if there has been more than one? What if
Hmm.
there's yeah, what if there's like, what do they call a federation? I'm just using that word
Right.
loosely as far
Sure.
as what if
Right.
there's a bunch of them
Well, why
that
would
have
they
been
be?
observing us?
The people who came to the New World here, in 1492, the first people who came, well, with the Spanish, but then the French came, the
Hmm.
English came, the Portuguese came. I mean, all different kinds of people came, and they all had different kinds of agendas too. So why would we think that that the aliens that finally come here, they're all going to be in silver suits and in flying
Exactly.
saucer shaped crafts? There's a good chance that there's a lot of them out there, and at some point, I don't know if that's true. If there's a lot of them out there, then it's inevitable that they're going to make themselves known and come here. It depends on when.
Right. And then, you have all these other stories about people, detailing abductions, whether it's once or systematically,
Hmm.
um, that as far as, they've been even given lie detector tests
Mm-hmm.
and they've passed it. In other words, which means that what they're saying, they believe it to be true.
Right, right.
Okay.
I can tell you what I think about that, and I came upon this kind of right after writing UFOs in Wartime, where I was on a radio show, and we were discussing exactly that, and where people who had abduction experiences would be hypnotized. There was a doctor at Harvard University near where we live, Dr. John Mack, I think his name was, and he was one of the first people. There was 2 or 3 people who were doing this. They would take abduction people who claimed they were abducted, and they would hypnotize them, and they would kind of just write down everything they said.
Right.
And they wouldn't let anyone else know. They wouldn't let. There was some stuff they did kind of write books about, but there was some stuff that they kind of kept to themselves. And one of them was that a lot of abductee people say, as strange as it sounds, they say that the beings that abducted them had tattoos. Okay.
Really?
And for a long time, John Mack's family, the people who kind of inherited all this research after he passed away, they kept that to themselves. But then it finally did get out there. And there's a couple other gentlemen who were doing the same thing. So what you have is people who have never met each other, let's say someone in Florida and someone in Washington State, opposite end of the country, having an abduction experience and both saying that the aliens had, or the people who abducted them, had tattoos. See, that's something you don't make up. You know what I mean? That's
exactly.
And I found that very strange. I thought, you know what, there must be something to this, because why would all these people say this without knowing everyone else is saying it? It's an
unusual thing.
It really is. It is an unusual thing. So I tend to believe, we have abductees sometimes on our show, and a lot of times people want to kind of discount what they've gone through, but they went through something, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Might not be little green men from Mars, but they went through something, because they all have this kind of common thread that goes through the stories, and it isn't like they've heard, these particular things before.
Well, I'm a hypnotherapist, and I was one for many years. I stopped doing it because I just didn't have enough time. And unfortunately, a lot of people think that because of whether it's recovered memories or regression or whatever, it's like, in some cases, yes, there have been hypnotists that unfortunately have led the person under hypnosis, which, by the way, there's a big misconception, because people think that when you're hypnotized, you're like totally unaware of what's going on. On the contrary, you're super aware of everything that's going on. It's just you're really super relaxed. And in that super relaxed state is when you're able to sometimes see what your critical mind doesn't let you see.
Right.
Because the belief is this, and normally your mind will do everything it can to protect you from going insane. In other words, if you witness or you saw something, and everybody's going to be different. Some people handle things better than others. It will shield you with amnesia, in other words. Or not the full thing, because at all costs the mind wants to protect the mind.
Right.
Sometimes a little bit of time will go by, and then people will start having weird dreams. In other words, the mind knows if and when that person can be aware of it and be okay. And then sometimes you never recover those memories, because the mind finds that if you ever became aware of whatever happened or transpired, you would not be able to handle it. Everybody's different. Yes. So you'd be surprised at what people will remember when they're totally relaxed and they're totally aware, and you're not of course led anywhere as far as recovering certain memories of certain things, and in a way where, if the hypnotist is trained the right way, where they go what's called into observer mode. In other words, it might be something a little bit traumatic, but it's almost like if you're looking at a movie, even though it's you, the hypnotist can pull you back and have you look at it like if you're looking at a movie, so that you don't lose it. In other words,
it's funny, because I was hypnotized once because I hate flying. I write aviation books. The Wingman series that you mentioned earlier on, it's about a jet fighter pilot. But I don't like flying at all. So I got hypnotized. I had to take a trip to California once, so I went to a hypnotist and hoping that they would help me. And I was there about 5 minutes, fell asleep in the chair, and woke up like 40 minutes later with a bill for $75. And I said, am I hypnotized? Am I cured? He says, no, you just fell asleep, but I just kept going. It was like the most expensive nap I
Well, you
ever
know
took.
what? If you relax somebody, I've had clients that have actually snored, but they're awake because you ask them, and there's stuff that because if you get somebody super super relaxed, they get to the
Mhm.
point where they can't. It's you're so relaxed that you can't even verbalize, but I can
Okay.
make you make signals with your finger, and as a matter of fact, that's a very good indicator that your subconscious is listening.
Hmm.
Where you ask for yes or no, and then you get, but the person almost like it's really hard for them to talk because they're so
Okay.
relaxed. But yeah,
Right.
I've handled clients like that they had to travel, and every time they got on a plane, it was like
Oh, the
the
worst. Yeah.
plane, an elevator, you
Yeah.
name it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
It,
was
it's planes with me because I write about them all the time, and I kind of know how the sausage is made, if you know what I mean,
okay.
And I'm telling you, it's just barely a theory that those things are up there, It really is. And I thought that hypnosis was going to cure me, but
Mm,
I took the trip 2 weeks later. I was terrified the whole way, so
right. Well, he
it
didn't
did not
address
catch.
it. If you fell asleep, it's like he relaxed really well, which is
Yeah,
great. Which is
too much.
but he kind of like,
Yeah.
but no. And let me ask you, d- you never actually have had a bad experience? It's just you're saying like in this case, ignorance would have been bliss, but since you're not ignorant, do you think have you always been
Yes.
afraid to fly?
Well, the first time I ever went up in a plane was I was a teenager, and we were went up on a sightseeing thing in a little Piper Cub,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like really looking forward to it. And the engine stopped in flight, if you can believe it. I can still see the propeller just boom,
That's a good
stopped,
reason to
and
be afraid.
yeah, yeah, and they started it up right away, and then we landed, and everything was good. But I got a feeling that probably scarred me for life or
I
something,
don't blame you.
But I don't like being. It's also a claustrophobic thing, I just don't like being kind of cooped up. You can't go
Hmm.
anywhere for so long. But and it turns out there's a lot of places I like to go, but I don't go. I take the train a lot, but
Okay.
which is really a nice way to travel. But I wish I could get over it somehow, to tell you the truth.
I had some clients that when they had these weird fears and phobias, sometimes, believe it or not, when they experienced their first time, they had a dip in their sugar levels, which made
Uh-huh.
them feel really bad. And somewhere, why the brain does this, that bad feeling in their body, they connect it to what they were doing. And sometimes it depends if it was early morning. Usually, when people
Mhm.
have sugar dips,
Yep.
your brain
Yeah.
makes this weird.
Yes, and people have told me that. They said that you're afraid of flying because of something that happened, something
Hmm.
different had happened, and
Yeah.
you're relating it to having to do with flying. We lived near
Yes.
an airport when I was growing up in Boston, and jets were going over all the time, like late at night, and they'd be so loud you couldn't talk. As a little kid, that can kind of scare you because
Sure.
it almost like they're going to crash into your house. Well, you might connect that feeling to it, like something
Sure.
happened earlier that day, and yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. I've been told that. So
Yeah. And somewhere, your mind made that connection and it
right. Yeah.
stuck.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's like, yeah. And I mean, you probably could be hypnotized out of it, like you said, because sometimes
Okay.
it's like the same thing I had when I had clients that were afraid to get in the elevator. It makes
Mhm.
getting to work or certain places really tough. Or either that or they were afraid of going in alone. They had to always, in other words, have somebody traveling in the elevator with them. So,
Right. Right. Going over bridges too is another thing. I know a lot
yes.
of people don't like going over bridges, even though
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's an unnatural fear because but you just don't like to be up there high and yeah, like I'm not crazy about bridges either. I'm always thinking at the top. Well, this is if it's going to collapse, it will collapse now when I'm on it. So.
You're right, exactly. Yeah, great timing on my part. A lot of it, believe it or not, is just tied back into anxiety and
Mhm.
self-soothing, and it's like, oh, that's a whole different thing. But yeah, yeah,
Another
I've
show.
heard of that where people got this little group of things that make them different levels of anxiety. Like I can handle
Mhm.
it, or there's no way I'm going to do that.
Right. I have to tell you the story real quick. I was on Amtrak. I take Amtrak to Florida all the time because we have relatives down there,
Hmm.
and I was taking a Amtrak to Boynton Beach, which is kind of close to Miami.
Hmm.
the Fort Lauderdale area around there.
Right.
And the train was stalled for an hour because an airplane crashed in the tracks about 2 miles in front of us.
You're
I'm
kidding.
thinking, well, wouldn't that be the ironic thing if the airplane crashed into the train I
Right.
was
It's
taking?
like
Yeah, because I'm afraid of flying.
in the afterlife, you would have said, "I knew it. I
I
knew
knew
it.
it. So, anyway.
I knew it was got to have something to do with an airplane."
All right.
And that's
So,
very unusual, like you said, because you have so many books that have to do with planes. And I
flying.
mean,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All of them. I mean, all like 40 of them. How many I've written? They all have some kind of an aviation, theme to them. And it's
yes,
like the guy who designs the greatest roller coasters in the world. He won't get on them. He doesn't like to ride roller coasters, yet he's famous for, designing all these crazy roller coasters at Six Flags and stuff. So
I
I
didn't
feel
know
like
that,
I'm kind of like him.
but that makes sense. Sometimes,
Yeah.
like you said, when you know too much about the mechanics of something,
You don't want to go near it.
you realize, man, if people only knew.
Right. Exactly.
So, and this, even though, I know they have all these different figures that you're more likely to have an accident in a vehicle, but I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you could survive it, but let's face it. One time I was looking at that there was out west of Miami, out in the Everglades, we've had 3 major airplane crashes.
Sure.
A lot of people don't realize that there was back one out in the 60s. And it's like that, the one of them, the Flight 401, did have survivors, but let's face it, in more than likely, if you're involved in an airplane crash, you're not going
Right.
to survive.
You're not going to survive,
You're
right?
not going to survive.
But it is very safe. I mean, there's 40,000 airplanes take off and land every day around the world, and you really don't hear of any really big crashes anymore. Back in
No.
the 60s and everything, when the technology was different, you did. But now it's just very safe, and it's safer than driving a car. There's no doubt about it. But it's the idea, or at least with someone like me, is that of just being up there, cooped up, not being able to go anywhere. If I was able to go in the cockpit and take over the controls myself, I'd feel better. As crazy as that is, but I just don't like that feeling, and that's what a lot of people don't like flying. They agree with me. It's like the more cooped up aspect that bothers me.
I know. It's a. Let me ask you: do you have problems being the passenger in the vehicle or riding in the back seat?
Um, Gee whiz.
Yeah, okay. Don't worry.
I've never had that question. I've never had that question. I don't, I don't really like driving, to tell you the truth. I don't like driving long distances. That's for sure. Because I get bored. I get
Right.
antsy. Is really what it's about.
I know. No, the reason why I asked is when you said that. Okay, like if they could let me in the cockpit and I feel better, it's like,
Right.
oh, I know, I've run across this. It's like if I have to, I'll drive. I'll drive. But
Yes, right. If I had a business, if I had my own jet, my own private jet, I don't think it would bother me as much, because I figured, well, in the worst case scenario, I could go and try to take the controls and try to be in control. That's another thing, as people say, is,
yes,
you feel like you're not in control when you're flying in an airplane.
yes, exactly.
And I know that feeling. That's a real anxious feeling.
Yes, I know. So let me ask you, with this thing with the UFOs and as far as with wartime and everything, I know that a lot of people out there have this magical thinking that they're thinking that if we ever got to the point in wartime of extinction, nuclear war, although, using, but if they think that the ETs are going to step in and save the day,
Right.
do you think that that's a possibility, or they're going to go, well, too bad?
Well, usually I'm like a bucket of cold water and stuff like that. But
Uh-huh.
I will tell you this, is in UFOs in wartime, we have 2 like extensive chapters about what happened around U.S. ICBM bases in the late 60s and the 70s, where, and there's been, like I say, entire books written about this. But there's no doubt about it that, throughout the 70s, that there were lots of UFO sightings around our ICBM bases in the middle part of the country. Now,
Okay.
these are places where, the missiles are like literally miles apart, and they're out in Montana and South Dakota, where it's nothing but just flat territory. And there's documented evidence that not only would these UFOs like show up at certain times, but when they would fly over one of these launch, facilities,
Right.
they would turn off the power. They would realign the targeting. They would knock off dozens of our ICBMs at any given time. That's like our last. That's our last defense,
Yes,
and to
yes.
and this went on for forever. And I always kind of give props to Peter Jennings because about 2 years before he died, he did a 3-hour special on ABC News
Uh-huh.
about UFOs, and it's like the most comprehensive thing you will ever see on, like our kind of media. And he really got into this. And he said, well, what were they doing, And everyone said, it seems like they were trying to tell us that we can change your technology. We can retarget these missiles. We can have a control over your most, the thing that is most important to your defense. And the thing
Right.
is that it happened in Russia too. That they would
Oh.
see UFOs over these ICBM bases in the Ukraine and so on. It was happening to them too. So once again, it's a mystery. But when you think about it, it's almost like they're saying, okay, we know what you got here. Here's a
Yes.
little hint to tell you that, we can turn it on and turn it off anytime we want.
Exactly. And it makes you even wonder, what if they do have installations here that it's like, we don't really care about the humans, but we have some bases and things that we really don't want to have blown
Mm-hmm.
up or contaminated or whatever the case might be. I mean,
Well, I'll tell the story again. I don't believe anything happened in Roswell, and a lot of people get on my case about that, but I really don't.
okay.
But there is a story about an ICBM base where it was so quote unquote haunted that even when they were building it, UFOs would show up to the point where the MPs would not go out and guard the construction at night
What?
because so many UFOs would show up and they would call jets and the UFOs would take off and then the jets would leave and the UFOs would come back. And that base, that ICBM base, is in Roswell, New Mexico. That's the real Roswell story. That there was a haunted ICBM base there to the point where the government actually went in and investigated what the heck was going on.
Uh-huh.
The MPs would not go out there at night. Okay.
That speaks volumes right there.
It's right down the street from where they supposedly found all this crash debris.
Mm-hmm.
That's the real story of Roswell. Look into that. Take the time and the effort of looking into that instead of what was most likely a weather balloon. And you might actually come up with something.
Well, yeah, I've heard in some cases that the Roswell incident is like a red herring, like, okay, pay attention to that, so you really don't look at what's really going on.
It's that, and it's been an excuse for people to write lots of books and to be on TV and to give lectures and everything, and where it gets to the point where, some book said that, 25 UFOs crashed at Roswell, and we have 50, but it's like, after the third or fourth crash, don't you think they would avoid Roswell, because they say for some reason we crashed there, It's a way, I just don't believe any of it. I mean, one of the things that people always kind of leave out in these stories about Roswell is that a good amount of rope and Scotch tape was found among debris. Okay?
Really? I never heard that.
Okay, and let's face it, if this was some kind of a flying saucer, UFO, or whatever, they wouldn't be using rope or Scotch tape.
I hope not.
So, I know I would actually like to go down there because I know it's kind of like a party every week down there, and it's a tourist attraction and so on. But like I say, the real story is about 40 miles up the street at this ICBM base there that was so haunted no one wanted to go out at night. That's pretty strange.
Yeah, that meant that something was happening all the time.
Right, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and I bet some of those MPs or soldiers were thinking, man, I don't want to get abducted. Forget it.
Yeah, exactly. They're afraid of it. So, interesting.
Very interesting. Well, Mac, thank you so much for spending this time today. I have thought it's so interesting. You said you also you have a show. When do you have that show airing? As far as, do you talk about the UFOs or?
Mm-hmm. It's called Mack Maloney's Military X-Files, where we talk about the military and UFOs and how they kind of intersect.
Okay.
We're on the Inception Radio Network. We're on Dark Matter Radio Network. We're on the Military Appreciation Channel, which supplies programming to Radio Free Europe and the Armed Forces Radio, I should say. So a lot of veterans listen in on our show. And we have a good
Okay.
time, and just Google us, and you'll find us eventually.
Yeah, believe me, I'm sure there's plenty of things to talk over and over. And
Hmm.
I mean, things are get dismissed, other things happened. People
Right.
open their minds to other possibilities of what their origins are,
Hmm.
including I know you've heard that they're us. In other words, they're time travelers.
Yes. Right. Sure. Yeah. I think there's a lot of evidence to that. I really do. I think
Hmm.
that if you had the ability, if we live 500 years from now or 5,000 years from now, and you had the ability to be a time tourist, to go back and see, how a
Yeah.
war was fought, how the siege of Troy. Someone said to me the other day, I'd come back and see a Shakespeare play. There's a
Yes.
lot of parallax stuff, we can't really figure out. Like if some people say, well, I'd go back, I want to be present at the crucifixion. Well, why aren't there a million people at the
Yes.
crucifixion? So there's stuff like that, that has to be kind of explained. But the idea that they just kind of are looking in on us as history is being made, there's a really good case for that.
I believe so. I mean if as being as human, exactly what you said, if time travel was possible, you would have probably a full ship all the time. Like, oh, I want to go back and
Right.
see what happened, whatever. Here we are, but we might be talking thousands of years in the future as far as where
Hmm.
we're at. You want to go back to the home base, the old time, way back where we came from, of course,
Yeah. Who
but why
wouldn't?
not? Why not? Maybe that's where it is. And here we're going round and round, pulling our hair out, trying to figure out who ET really is.
Right.
Again, thank you so much, Mac. It has been wonderful to have you. I'm going to include
Same
a
here.
credit to your show here in the credits of the show, the link. And thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Well, it's great talking to you. Thanks for inviting me, and hopefully
Absolutely.
we'll talk soon. Okay.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Take care.
Okay. Thank you, Marlene.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So, guys, what did you think? I loved it. What can I say? It's all about the ETs. No, really. You know what? I'm going to tell you why. There's just so many theories out there. And, yes, there's people that have mental illness and they hallucinate stuff. Yes. There's people that are lying. Yes. There's people that see something they believe is real, but it isn't. Yes. But that still leaves so many incidents described. And you know what? And everybody says, well, because if it's military or police, there's a lot of people that are not military, not police, not trained observers, but that doesn't mean that they don't have too good pair of eyes and are skeptics. And like he said, usually this happens when you're not looking for it to happen. And they see something. They see something and they're probably, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of these people that are wanting to identify it as something human origin, as in the weather balloon, a plane, whatever. And they can't, they go through this list and then they're faced with that moment of, oh God, this is not a plane, this is not a helicopter, this is not anything I can account for. Okay, I am looking at a UFO. And this is the interesting thing, which is what Mac and me were talking about was, this recent disclosure that they did now in December of 2017, that they admitted to funding a program to look at all these sightings of UFOs. As in, are we talking ET? Are we talking man-made, but somebody out there got, because of the way these things move. And we were thinking, okay, why now? Is it just coincidental? Or we are at the edge of the precipice. We just don't know that we're at the edge of the precipice as far as discoveries and admissions about life from other planets, other galaxies, being either here, observing us, or in some cases there's people that believe that they've given us technology, or that there's even hybrids of humans and extraterrestrials, that there's more than one extra. I mean, the ramifications on this could go so many ways. And I still subscribe to my original idea, which is I think that despite, what you see with the X-Files, which, the main theme of the X-Files has always been that there's this huge uh, plan that the government has had with ETs. I think sometimes it's like what Mac was saying at the very beginning. There might be more that they don't know than what they do know. And if they ever admitted it, if something just happened, that's it. It can't be denied anymore. Of course, they're going to be flooded with questions. What are they? Where do they come from? What do they want? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, the questions would be endless. Can you imagine what position the government would be in? Whatever government, whether it's the United States or any other government, let's face it, at some point, all the governments are going to be having to answer these questions, even if one admits it, because we all live on the same planet. And they would have to say, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. If you don't think there's be a lot of people, especially the ones that have always believed it, but I've always thought that there was this big integration between these extraterrestrials and the government of whatever, and come to find out that they don't. Wow. Wow. I'm telling you, a lot of people, and maybe I'm being overly dramatic, but I don't. I don't know if some of you, I'm sure, remember when the year 2000 was coming about, and they had all these end of the world movies like Final Impact or whatever. And one of the fears that they had about the one, with the meteor coming and hitting Earth was, besides the fact that they couldn't save anybody, was that economies and societies would collapse. Because people would stop going to work, people would stop paying their bills, people would just stop following the rules, the law. It'd be a free-for-all because now, this is not the same as in there's a meteor coming into Earth and it's going to possibly wipe out most of the life form on there. But if you don't think that, especially here in the United States, where we have laws and society and everything, people go to work, wake up next day, send your kids to school, whatever's going on with you. If you don't think that the admission, first of all, of extraterrestrials coming to Earth, whatever, but the government's having to admit that they know, in fact, very little about them, that perhaps all the information they have is what's been captured off of planes, all these, objects that are flying in at certain speeds that we don't know how they do it. Or even more, besides the fact is, how do they get here? That's like, everybody would be like, what? There's going to be the doomsday sayers. They're coming. They're going to enslave us. Everybody would remember every movie that there is out there about ETs and UFOs. Independence Day. They wipe War of the Worlds. You could think of the one, Counters of the Third Kind, the one that came out in the 70s, where they kind of traded. We kind of traded species. It was very interesting. Also, how would we communicate? I'm telling you, there'd be a lot of people, a good majority of people worldwide, that would have a hard time wrapping their heads around that. As far as, how do I go back to live my life the way I used to before I had this knowledge, before I realized that even my government or the people that are supposed to take care of this just maybe know a little bit more than I do? Is it nothing? I'm telling you, that's why I think that as far as how they handle this, despite, Hollywood acclimating us kind of in a way to ETs. It was, like we said, back in the 50s and 60s, it was the Cold War. That's why they had all these flying saucer movies and was that fear of the Cold War. But Cold War's been over. Well, at least that Cold War's been over for a while. Okay, Berlin Wall fell. But I'm telling you, there's a big, 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 huge difference between what you either totally deny exists, or that you kind of believe it could be possible, but either you haven't seen an ET or UFO, you're open to it. Yeah, like, man, I can't believe that no other planet has life. And even if you're one of these people, I'm not even going to say an abductee, I'm not even going to go that far. But let's say you're one of these people that has seen, genuinely believes that they have seen a UFO. Okay? And there's an admission that they are here, that they have been here, are here, whatever. And that there's so much that we don't know about. I'm telling you. Whoa. Our society would change, despite what everybody thinks. It would totally change. Because all of a sudden we would be taken out of being the center of it all. It's all about us. To, oh, wait a minute. We're really just truly living on this little planet. And as important as we are to this planet and ourselves, and wow, we might be just a speck with some carbon-based life on it. So yeah, that's really interesting. I believe I would be alive to see this. I hope to be alive, and I believe I will be alive to see when we finally reach Mars. And makes you wonder, what's going to happen with us? What's going to happen with the human species? I mean, let's face it, within the last 100 years, our technology has, it's grown by leaps and bounds. And, there's a lot of people out there that say that mankind's advances are due to interaction with extraterrestrials. Could be just that we're real smart, and it was just something like, we reached critical mass when it came to inventions, the Industrial Revolution, etc. But anyway, a lot of mysteries, guys, a lot of mysteries, a lot of frontiers out there as far as exploration is concerned, whether it's physical exploration or whether it's science. I mean, interdimensional travel. I mean, possibilities are endless. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this show. I know I love speaking with Mac. I'm hoping to bring on more people that deal with the ufologists, extraterrestrials. There's a lot of schools of beliefs out there. Like I said, that is part of the paranormal, because right now it's not normal. So anyway, guys, I hope you like this show. Please hit the subscribe button, whether you're watching the video on YouTube or you're catching me on any other podcast platforms, so that this way you get notified when I release a show. Also, one of the advantages is that you can download the MP3 file and listen to it at your leisure, which I know from personal experience that sometimes that's the best, easiest way for me to listen to things, because sometimes we have crazy schedules and it's just easier to download a show and then listen to it, And for my true believers, don't forget to send me your stories. I look forward to receiving more stories. Go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, go to the Submit Your Story tab. There's different ways that we can get together, whether you want to send it to me or while I interview you, whichever you prefer. And catch me on Facebook and on Twitter. I live stream there a lot. Got some fantastic guests coming on. I'm telling you, I'm going far and wide to bring the most interesting people out there, authors, experts, just so we could talk about, their own personal experiences, in this case, what they write about, and what they believe is going to be happening, and whatever their field of interest is. So, guys, thank you so much. It has been wonderful, and you're all wonderful. Take care.